Concept of Sunnah in the Muwatta of Malik ibn Anas, Mohammed Yusuf Guraya, Mcgill, Montreal, 1969. Malik's view of hadith and Sunnah. Al-Muwatta represents the transition from the simple fiqh of the earliest period to the pure science of hadith in the latter period. The Muwatta is a good gauge for judging the extent of the popularity of which hadith had gained by the time of Malik ibn Anas. It is interesting to note that through the hadith movement becoming popular, though the hadith movement had become popular, hadiths from the Prophet were greatly outnumbered by the hadith from the companions and the successors. Abu Bakr al-Abhari has given a list of hadith from the Prophet, from the companions and from the successors contained in the Muwatta. He says that the total number of hadiths in the Muwatta from the Prophet, from the companions and the successors is 1,720. Out of 600 hadiths are musnad, i.e. traced back to the Prophet without interruption. 222 hadiths are mursal, lacking the first transmitter. 316 are mawquf, i.e. which end with the companion. 285 are sayings of successors. There are thus altogether 822 hadiths from the Prophet, as against 898 from others. The Muwatta compiled by Muhammad ibn Hasan al-Shaybani contains 429 hadiths from the Prophet, as against 750 from others. That is 628 from the companions, 112 from the successors, and 10 from later authorities. These figures are an indication of the fact that Malik was not overtly concerned about the isnad. For him, the latter technical terms al-musnad and mursal are equivalent. He used both kinds of hadith on equal footing, and mursal has the same force as musnad. 2. In the Muwatta, Malik generally opens every legal chapter with a hadith from the Prophet. In the details of the discussions on legal issues in the Muwatta, however, we find that Malik does not consistently adhere to this principle. On the priority of hadith from the Prophet over hadith from the companions and others, he mentions, no doubt, hadith from the Prophet in the beginning of each chapter, but often he finds it necessary to contradict it or to interpret it in the light of the hadith of the companions or others. Jabir ibn Abdullah reports that the Prophet said, "Anything which is donated to someone belongs to the donee and to his descendants. The donation, is for the donee to whom it is donated. It will never return to the donor, because he has donated a thing which will be inherited by the descendants of the donee." Contrary to this clear hadith from the Prophet, Malik holds that the donation is conditional upon the life of the donee. According to this doctrine, al-umrah, life donation, is conditional upon the life of the donee, and his death, the donation will return to the donor in absence of explicit instructions by the donor. Supporting Malik's view, Az-Zurqani has defined the term al-umrah etymologically as follows. Someone says to someone, "I donate for life to you a house or land or a camel," when he actually means, "I give it to you and say to you that it is yours as long as you live, and when you die you will return it to me." He quoted the pre-Islamic Jahili poet Labid in this support. The possessions are only donated trusts, and trusts have to be returned someday inevitably. The doctrine of Malik about Umrah runs counter to the hadith of the Prophet, which, though mentioned in the beginning of the discussion, does not prevail. Malik to Nafi' to Abdullah ibn Umar to the Prophet reported that the parties to sale have the right of option as long as they have not separated. Malik, not approving of this hadith, declares, "We have no fixed limit about it, nor is the matter under practice." Examples of this type could be given almost endlessly, but the above evidence on the topic will suffice to prove the fact that hadith from the Prophet in the Muwatta does not have the same meaning and the same legal force as it has in the orthodox point of view. Malik has disregarded the hadiths from the Prophet when they are not in conformity with the view which Malik prefers. Having established this fact, we now turn to the question of authority of the hadith from the Prophet in relation to hadiths from the companions and the successors, as well as in relation to the practice of Medina. Malik reports 3 hadiths from the Prophet approving the practice of tamattu.